I first, believe it or not, started covering this Columbine for my college paper. And one of the lines I had in 1999 was, how many more of these are we going to have? 26 years later, we are still having the same shootings with the same shooter profiles. You know, the disaffected young man for the most part. We're getting numb. And look, it breaks into news programs, and then we go to the next crazy story. It doesn't stay in the national conversation like it used to. And that's a problem.
Alrighty, welcome in Alabama Politics this week. I am Josh Moon. That is
David Person.
How are you, David?
Good. It's a sunny September day, man. I'm loving it.
No, it's not. It's a sunny October day. It's a sunny October.
Oh, you're right.
You're
right.
Yeah,
Today's
we've slipped over into October.
That's right.
We're still in the
right.
80s, approaching 90
You're
some
right.
days. I'm okay with that. I can live with it. Is still getting a nice sweat when I do my running, so I'm okay. Yeah, no, we're into October now. Things have progressed. We'll be Thanksgiving and Christmas before too much longer, and had the fall festival for my daughter's school last night, and so it's
okay.
it's so we're well into fall now, man. We're getting it done. Got the Halloween decorations up, ready to roll. Yeah, right.
Halloween decorations. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Exactly. But hey, before we get rolling here and get into which sports figures we're going to anoint to lead us in politics next, I need to tell you about our friends at Wind Creek Entertainment, because they sponsor us. They are fantastic. We really appreciate everything that they do here for us, and that's basically just sponsor and make sure the show keeps going. And otherwise, they are some of the best neighbors you can have around this state. They employ a large number of Alabamians and contribute to our economy in ways that are often overlooked, to be honest. They get overlooked a lot in terms of all the other things they do outside of gaming. But we're talking about the gaming with Wind Creek Entertainment, and they offer three extraordinary spots for you to go and enjoy some gambling in this state. That's electronic bingo at Atmore, Wetumpka, and Montgomery. The Wetumpka and Atmore spots are their resort places, and man, they really are resorts. So you go and you have a fantastic time. They are top of the line in everything that they do at those places. And David stayed at the one in Wetumpka recently. I've stayed at the one in Atmore recently. They are both fantastic. And I'll tell you another thing that I would encourage people to do is if you go down to the one in Atmore, or if you're just driving through, I would encourage, you got the kids or whatever, I would encourage you to go and go to the visitor center in Atmore on the reservation. Take a little time, learn about the tribe, learn about where they are, what they're doing, all the stuff they've got going on. Maybe even get some of the beef that they've got. They're self-sustaining there. They have their own little beef operation, and I got some, and it still got it in the freezer. We've been eating on it for a while now, and it is really, really good stuff. But
so we've never talked about that. Just real quickly, are you saying it's like going into a grocery store and you can just pick?
It's a beef processing plant. It's called Perdido Farms that they have there, and you can, I believe you can call them now. They should be all set up that you can call them and place an order with them. I believe. I mean, I'll look it up and make sure. But they have. I mean, it was neat when I was there. They had just really kind of gotten started. So this was almost a year ago. They really were pushing forward and trying to get this done because they wanted to be self-sustaining within the reservation. The pandemic kind of put them on this path where they saw that there were some shortfalls where they couldn't take care of themselves, and they were relying upon other things like grocery stores, for example, and they didn't want that. They wanted to be able to serve their people and to make sure that their people on the reservation and in the surrounding communities, for that matter, would be able to eat, would be able to have the things that they need, the necessities there, and we're not having to rely on others. And so that was one of their major focuses, was to start a beef operation, and so they were going to expand that, is my understanding, and passed past just beef to some other stuff. I don't know if that has taken place or not yet, but yeah, that was one of their big goals, was to make sure that they were no longer relying upon others to just basically feed the folks on their reservation and in the community.
Okay.
And so,
wow.
yeah, it was a really neat operation, and they put some real time and effort, and like everything that they do, it was top notch. Everything, they went out and hired the best and had the best folks doing it and had the best equipment and the best processes and everything else. So it was kind of, that was my point of saying this, was it's kind of like everything else they do, is they want to make sure it's done right and it's done well. And that's the way they run those resorts. That's the way they've always run them. And I would encourage anybody who's traveling through those spots, you're going over to Auburn to a football game, staying with Wetumpka, headed down to the beach, staying at Moore or Wetumpka, and just break up the trip and have yourself a really nice time at a really quality location. Look them up online at Wind Creek Entertainment, and you'll not be disappointed. I guarantee you that.
Yeah.
All righty. Although you might be disappointed in the quality of the candidates that we choose to run for office. So this week brought, actually, you know what? I guess we should say, because I don't think we've spoken since Bruce Pearl decided he's not running for office. So Bruce Pearl ducked out and Finebaum ducked in. That's Paul Finebaum.
Right.
And I wrote a column about Paul getting in. I don't want to overstate that I've known Paul Finebaum for a while and make it seem like he and I are old pals. That's would not be the case at all. We're acquaintances, I guess would be the best way to say it. I did a sports show for a number of years. Paul was often on the sports show as a guest a number of times. He was closer and more friendly with my co-host at the time, Doug Amos, and so I think that he and I know each other. We know each other's work. I've been a guest on his show several times. And so I've known Paul for a while. That said,
like professional acquaintances.
Yes, absolutely. Friends. Yeah, absolutely. And the guy that he told us to, Clay Travis, I used to be not many people know this, but I used to be a regular on Clay Travis's show when he had a show in Nashville. He did a show with two other guys up there, and I kind of got the sense that Clay Travis was an in and out kind of entity on that show, and because the other guys were the ones who would always call and make sure that I was coming on that week or whatever, and Clay would be there, and we would talk and laugh and go back and forth with things, and like a lot of people, unlike a lot of people, I never really was bothered that much by Clay Travis, the sports guy. I've been amazed by Clay Travis, the conservative pundit, because I know it's bullshit. It's utter bullshit. I mean, he has suckered people into this. Okay. Oh, it's 100% bullshit. He is a Democrat through and through. He and his wife were big supporters of Hillary Clinton. And I mean, he just decided one day that he saw Clay has a unique talent for spotting a sucker and playing a role to appeal to that sucker. And he found some suckers in the MAGA movement, and listen, to his credit, it's worked out exactly the way he hoped it would work out for him. And maybe he, at this point, he now believes this stuff. I don't know. But at the time that he got into it, it was complete and utter bullshit. I mean, it was him playing a role. But Finebaum is also, I'll say this, I think Paul Finebaum is also playing a role. I do not believe. I don't believe for a second that he was inspired by Charlie Kirk to get into this race. I don't believe for a second that he is a big Trump supporter. Matter of fact, I think there's going to be audio of him that comes out over the course of some time here of him saying bad things about Donald Trump, because this is what I know about Paul Finebaum. Okay, for all of whatever you feel about Paul and whatever you feel about his antics at times and his style of doing things, Paul's a smart guy. He's a well-read guy. He's a guy that can sit in a room with pretty much anybody and have a conversation with them. He is not an uncaring person, and I think those are all a lot of the qualities that it would take for somebody of intelligence to gravitate to the side of MAGA.
Well, so then my question is, if he is this person that you've described, what's his motive for doing this? I mean, he's at the top of he's really at the top of the heap in terms of sports journalism. Why would he, I mean, he's making tons of money. Why would he need to do this?
I honestly don't know the answer to that, but I guess, you look at it the same way. Why would Bruce Pearl consider doing it?
Well, I think in Pearl's case, it's a lot more obvious, though. I mean, he had some real obvious convictions that were driving him. I mean, his politics related to the state of Israel, you know, he was unabashed, about expressing that. So,
well,
I mean, I've never heard Finebaum say anything political. Right. I mean, have I missed that? I mean, other than the criticisms of Trump that you've,
I think privately
he has. I don't know.
I think he's kept a lot of that out of his work, and I think privately he's probably had a lot of conversations with people about politics and things of that nature. But I don't know that some of those he would necessarily won't broadcast as well if he's going down this pathway, this Republican pathway of I love Trump and Trump is the best and we're gonna get this all done for Trump. But I think that, first of all, I know that he was encouraged to do this by certain people. And, there's a lot of speculation that Katie Britt and her team are really involved in this push. And while I don't doubt that Katie Britt is probably very excited and very supportive of this if he were to get in the race, I also think that you could pick out any number of people in the mainstream, more moderate Republican, and by more moderate, listen, I understand what I'm saying there, okay? I'm not saying they're moderates. I'm saying they're more moderates. Yeah. The more moderate wing, the more business-focused, more business-centric wing of the state Republican leadership outside of the real crazies that are out there, I think, though you could pick any number of those people and they would be behind anybody with the name ID and a little bit of common sense getting into this. That's the reason why those are the same folks who were pushing for Bruce Pearl to get in the race. Now they've when Pearl decided not to, for whatever his reasons were, they pivoted quickly to Finebaum because they're trying to find a name to prevent Steve Marshall from landing in that seat. Yeah, and that's the whole goal. Yeah.
That's what I was going to say. To that end, maybe, I almost can't believe I'm saying this, but maybe to that end that I actually like this move because, Finebaum, and I don't follow him nearly as much as you do and a lot of our probably listeners and viewers do, but he strikes me as being a reasonable fellow.
Yes.
Has a fairly moderate tone. I know he's criticized Trump in the past. The fact that he may be having this late evening conversion now, maybe it is part of a sort of a Machiavellian kind of thing to set up, what Britt is trying to orchestrate here. And if Katie Britt is if she is trying to reshape the Alabama delegation to the extent that she can, so that it's a little more practical and a little more moderate, I'm all for that. If that's what she's trying to do, I'm all for that. Again, not that I want to see a Republican in that seat, because I know their politics aren't going to, generally speaking, line up with mine.
Right.
But I think our state will be better off if we have somebody who's a little closer to Katie Britt and a lot less like Tommy Tuberville.
Yes. All of that. Yes. Yeah. And that's, that was also one of the reasons why I thought Bruce Pearl would be a better option. I felt like while Pearl certainly has shown himself to be a very conservative person, he is also at times shown some compassion and also, I felt like he was one of those people it would be tough for him to forget some of the living rooms he's sat in. Unlike Tuberville, it would be tough for Bruce Pearl to forget some of the living rooms he sat in, some of the people he's spoken to, some of the hardships he's seen firsthand. It would be hard for him to forget those things and turn his back the way Tuberville has. And that's my problem with Tommy Tuberville. I don't dislike Tommy, as I've said before, I don't dislike Tommy Tuberville just because he's a Republican or anything else. I actually liked Tommy Tuberville as a coach. I liked dealing with him. I liked interacting with him on the few times that I did interact with him. I felt like he was a very straightforward guy. He was funny. He was personable. He was very, very likable guy, and I felt like he was very in tune with his players. The disappointment part to me is how this person who went all over this state and all over the Southeast for that matter, and sat in the living rooms and talked to people and understood the struggles of so many young men and their families and what they went through and what was necessary to bring them out of that struggle. The tools and resources that were employed by Auburn and by high schools and everybody else to pull those kids out of that poverty and the distressed schools and all the other things that they had to face and the violence and things, and then to just pretend like none of that existed. And that's what he's done basically in the Senate. I mean, he's just basically pretended as though none of that existed, and then talked ignorantly about those problems as though he never encountered any of them, and he had no idea about these people, and they were all just villains, that were born bad guys, and he has no understanding of that. He recruited some people that I think others would call bad guys, other uneducated people would call bad guys, and he should know better that they're not.
Well, yeah, I would just say that all of this is proof that he never believed it in the first place, that he never really was the guy that you thought he was, that he was always an opportunistic person trying to do his job, which is to recruit the best players, and he really didn't care about anything else, and anything else was just a disingenuous act. That's what it says to me.
I mean, that could be the case. I don't know. It's, me, I always love to try to see the best in people, and so, it's, and don't like to be critical.
But, college sports, and I know this is a whole nother conversation perhaps. Mm-hmm. But many of us concluded a long time ago that, especially before the NIL era, not so much now, I don't think you can say this so much now, but pre-NIL, it was a plantation, man. That's what it was. You had these young people, especially if you're talking about basketball and football, these young people who are making tons of money for these Division I schools and for these Division I coaches who are becoming millionaires on the backs of kids that were getting nothing other than a scholarship that would pale in comparison to the money that they were making for the schools and the coaches. That's plantation, man. So, the fact that Tommy Tuberville may have been a benevolent, quote unquote, plantation owner is just mere opportunism. That's all it is to me. It was a means to an end.
Yeah, I mean, I think you see a lot of the the bad mentality of what college sports used to be, and the way a lot of people are acting now that the athletes have a little bit of power and a little bit of say so over their careers. I've outlined a number of times how unfair this whole process is, and I've tried to explain it to people now when they talk about what's ruining college athletics. And I said, well, I mean, you talk about ruining college athletics in this transfer portal, where they can hop in and go wherever. And I do think that that some of that stuff should be solved. But the thing that would solve it are the things that these colleges are resistant to, which is giving the players contracts. If you gave them a 4-year contract to stay there with you, or a 3-year contract, or what have you, a 3-year with an option for a 4th or whatever, then that would solve almost all of this transfer portal stuff that you have in place right here. But they don't want to do that because they don't want to take the risk of the evaluation, and the evaluation's going bust, and then paying for the players, and they don't want to do this. But even though they're making still billions of dollars off of this. Yeah. And this is what's got them into this problem right now is they for so long fought against this thing. And here's the system that we used to have, okay? That a player in high school signed a letter of intent with his college, all right? That letter of intent was binding to that player. Okay, that letter of intent was binding to that player, and then that player had to go to that school, and if he decided that school wasn't for him, or there something happened, or whatever, that school still had basically owned that player. All right, the player could leave, but he had to sit out a whole year before he could play again. In the meantime, those scholarships that everybody talks about were not 4-year scholarships. They were single-year scholarships each year that had to be renewed by the coach. And, there are stories of all these different coaches basically telling people, we're not going to renew your scholarship because you're not performing on the field. And all this academic talk and all this, oh, well, listen, you're here getting an education. It's all about a student and an education. Well, it's bullshit. They were pushing them out. I mean, there's a guy right now that does a podcast in this state with McCready and Siskey, I believe is the guy's name. He used to coach at Alabama and some other places. And he talked about himself at Auburn, Tuberville, telling him that it was time for him to go. He'd run out of the Auburn tunnel for the last time on the home side. And that if he wanted to do it again, he needed to go somewhere else. And so he transferred to Troy and ended up playing and then started coaching. And so those things happened all the time. So that's what the players were faced with. Okay. It was doing all of these different things and having a system that basically they had to give out their gift, their athleticism. That's what this was. People, and you can scoff at that if you want, but people were making billions of dollars off of that gift. Yeah. Okay, billions and billions of dollars off of that, and they were risking that every single time they stepped on any field, practice field, playing field, wherever. They were risking that through injury. As Tyrone Prothro, who played at Alabama, who should have been making millions of dollars, and ended up with a broken leg that took, 17, I think, surgeries to finally correct, never played again. Was one of the best players I've ever seen play. And, and now I think he worked for a bank for a while around and did some things. I mean, it's a perfectly good life, but it's nothing like what he would have had he played in today's era where you see people are perfectly willing to pay these guys millions and millions and millions of dollars to come out and play for these schools, which are still making millions and millions of dollars.
That's right.
It's just,
that's right.
And so we could have been doing this all along, but what the coaches are all pissed off about is now this is going to cut into their salaries. This is going to cut into what they can make and earn off of these things, because now it's not endless money going out to these staffs and stuff. And coaches that may be inferior, and I'm not necessarily saying Nick Saban is an inferior coach here, but people who, let's be honest, Nick Saban did win a lot of games because he out-recruited the hell out of everybody and stocked his team with a bunch of players on there that prevented those same players from going elsewhere and playing against him. And so I think that you could attribute a few wins here or there to that. Not to say, again, Nick Saban's probably the best I've ever seen at breaking down position by position what a person should be doing on each play and explaining it in a way that's relatable to those players. I've never seen anybody do it any better than he did it, and how he did it and how he trained his staffs to do it. It was phenomenal. But, it was just all set up against the players.
Yeah, well, and I would even argue, not to belabor the point, but I would even argue that the recruiting process, mastering that in a way that's beneficial to your team, regardless of what you're doing, in terms of the strategy regarding, taking players off the board for others. That's a part of coaching too, and that's
Yes. Well, certainly it is.
It's a valid strategy. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the thing that now, I think if this is done right and proper, that what we have now is a system that's going to basically help out. It's going to spread the wealth around a lot more to teams, and I think it's going to help players that would have maybe languished on the bench somewhere. And now they're able to go somewhere else and play for another program and get exposure and let people see that. Now, I also think there are probably going to be a handful of players who are hurt by this as well. Some guys like, let's say, Ty Simpson, who's now the quarterback at Alabama, that I don't know how this turned into a sports show, but it did. But, he
the same thing.
he sat on the bench for a while and learned, and now he's got his shot, and it's probably going to pay off for him. And there's some other stories like that as well out there. But for a lot of players, that's not the pathway. And at this point, everything else in their lives say that they're adults. Okay. The way they're treated is that they're adults at that point. I still think of them as kids. I call them kids a lot, but everything else in their life say they're adults. And so if you're going to say that, well, then it's time to let them make some decisions, and I think that's a big one for them.
Well, let's bring it on back to politics. So
let's stay with sports. Listen, the baseball playoffs have started.
if this is what Katie Britt is doing, again, I think I can support it to that degree and say, all right, well, let's see what Finebaum has to say. Let's see what his political acumen is. And again, he seems like a reasonable person in a lot of ways. So maybe he will be no more Trumpish than Britt is, which to me, she kind of vacillates between Trumpish in a really irritating, kind of disgusting way and being reasonable on other things. And if that's the best we can hope for, then I guess that's what we'll have to live with. I tell you what, it makes me miss even more Richard Shelby, who my interactions with him through the years and watching him through the years, even though I didn't agree with his politics, I had a lot of respect for the man.
Yeah.
He was reasonable in tone. He knew what he was doing, what he was talking about. And to me, in terms of Republican leadership in the state, I'm going to say he's the gold standard for me. In fact, I'd say even, and this may surprise some people, I'd say he and also Bob Riley. Again, and we don't have to really go down this rabbit hole unless you just want to, but I think both of them sort of the gold standard for Republican conservative politics in this state, at least over the past 30 years.
Yeah, I quibble with Riley over the gambling stuff that he did. I felt that was
quibble with him over stuff too, but I'm just saying, no, overall.
I understand what you're saying. Yeah, he did do a lot of things that I think, especially towards the end of his career as governor, I felt like he really put a focus on wanting to better the state, and I felt like his the Amendment 1 thing that he wanted to pass was something that was focused primarily on changing the state for the better. And and of course the rich folks killed it because they did not want to have that shift in the way we fund our government. They did not want to have that shift of the burden away from the poor folks in this state. And so that's how that worked. And I do appreciate that. Like I said, we both had some quibbles with him and the way he did things, but Richard Shelby was exactly that. Shelby was a Democrat. He was elected as a Democrat to begin with, and converted over to the Republican side of things. And but I still think he's what you would call a statesman. He's one of those old school guys that didn't really get bogged down in just the stupidity of things. And that's, I can deal with that. I can disagree with people. And, there's some folks like that today, I've used him before and I'll use him again. Nathaniel Ledbetter, for example, who leads the House right now. I disagree with Ledbetter on probably 90% of policy, but man, you can have a conversation with Nathaniel Ledbetter. You can go out. He's not going to be, he wants to work with people. He doesn't want to be adversarial. He doesn't take pride in saying ridiculous things. He doesn't take, it's not like he's always looking for a microphone so he can put somebody down, so he can attack a marginalized group of people, so he can, and to say just off the wall crazy things about stuff, and to do things that just bring attention to himself constantly. And those types of people are who you want in government. Even if you disagree with them, man, you can at least say, hey, so somebody you can say, look, here's a problem I've got with this legislation that you're doing here, and let me show you how it affects the people of my district that I'm concerned with, and here's what I think we could do to change it to make it better. And if you've got a person on the other side who will say, okay, well, let me see that, then that's what you're looking for in government. Is somebody that says, who is self-conscious and self-aware enough to realize that I may not have all the answers. Yeah, I may not know all the people. I may not know these groups of folks. I don't go into, whoever's district in Jefferson County where this might be, this legislation that we're going to impose might be felt dramatically different than it is in my district in Rainsville, And that's what you want out of somebody, is somebody that takes into account those people and realizes that they're there to govern for everybody. And even if they ultimately still sign the legislation in some form or fashion, if they're willing to at least acknowledge and say, listen, I've thought about this, and here's the reason why I think you're wrong, or that I'm right, or that why I don't think it's going to do this, or here's the thing that we can do to make it a little bit better for those folks over there, or how we can make this thing work a little bit better. That's all you're looking for. And we've lost completely that by these performative artists and people who don't give a shit about anybody, and you can name them. You can go down the line and name them. We all know who I'm talking about. We all know what they're doing. And I don't understand for the life of me why people still elect these fools, and I assume that works the same way on the Democratic side, although I think we could all say that it's far lesser than that. I think there are some people who like to put on some performances from time to time. I give them more of a pass because at least the performances that they're putting on often aid the poorest among us. And, and so I can, give a pass a little bit, but I don't know. It's getting tiring. I'll tell you that. All right. Hey, we're going to get out of here. We're going to come back in just a minute with the Trace's Jennifer Mascia. We're going to talk about guns and shooting deaths. And I cannot imagine a more bang your head against the wall beat than what she is on with this. But she's an expert. She's done some really great work for the Trace. We'll come back and get her on. It's Alabama Politics This Week, brought to you by Wind Creek Entertainment. We're back in a minute. Alrighty, welcome back. Alabama Politics This Week. Josh Moon, David Person. We're happy now to be joined by Jennifer Mascia, and we'll make sure that we absolutely say her name correctly because I've read her work, and if there's anything, the least of which we could do after the work that she's done is pronounce her name correctly because, Jennifer. So first of all, thank you for coming on with us.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Sure. Man, we have some folks that come on from time to time who get into the Alabama prison system, and they cover that for a beat, basically. And I always say the same thing, which is I don't know how you do that, get up every day and go back to doing that. And I kind of, as I read through a bunch of your stuff, I thought, I don't know how she does this all the time because, correct me if I'm wrong, and maybe outside looking in, maybe I am wrong about this, but it seems as though you, because you did this for the New York Times for a while, you've been with the Trace now for a number of years, and it seems as though as you've covered these the mass shootings, we just had another church shooting of all things. It seems like we're, as a public, caring less and less and less, that we've been desensitized to a lot of the violence and to just the pure awfulness of it. I thought the other day when they had the church shooting, we would have stopped everything we were doing 10 years ago. And it would have been a national, we would have broken into ball games and into TV shows, and we would have all sat around the TV and watched the awfulness transpire. Am I wrong in saying that's changed?
No, I've been covering this since Sandy Hook. So remember where you were then. That's a long time ago now. And there were about 5 years from around the time of the Charleston church shooting till the pandemic where we did have a series of catastrophic mass shootings, Las Vegas, that did stop the country.
Right.
And I think what happened is we are getting numb. And this is one of my biggest fears. I first, believe it or not, started covering this Columbine for my college paper. And one of the lines I had in 1999 was, how many more of these are we going to have? 26 years later, we are still having the same shootings with the same shooter profiles. The disaffected young man, for the most part. We're getting numb. And it's not that, I think in these immediate communities, they are absolutely torn apart by these shootings. They really feel it like it's the first and only one because it's their whole community. However, it breaks into news programs and then we go to the next crazy story. It doesn't stay in the national conversation like it used to. And that's a problem.
Yeah. I've heard people say a lot when they said we didn't do anything after the first graders were killed at Sandy Hook. That pretty much ended the hope for a lot of people. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, on the federal level, it definitely did. But what happened after that was that states got together. Blue states, they decided that they wanted to pass state-level regulations. And then red states passed regulations loosening gun laws. So there was action that happened. Some of it positive. But federally, I think that horse is dead.
Yeah. It just seems like that is, so yeah. And you mentioned this, and it's one of the things I wanted to ask you was the disaffected young man is the typically who do is the person that is responsible for these things. Has there ever, in all the coverage that you've done and all the people that you've talked to, all the experts and things, is there ever been an explanation for why they've chosen schools and churches? For the most part, what is it about those places that make it the target for these people who, or whatever their problems are, whatever has led them to this? Why do they choose those places?
Profilers have come to understand that people choose those places, mass shooters choose those places, because they are symbols of institutions in their lives that have failed them. School. People go back to their old schools. We've seen a lot of mass shooters go to their schools when they've graduated. Right. And we saw that with Sandy Hook, a number of other shootings, Annunciation, workplace shootings. This happens when someone's fired. These are, these young men are taught that the world is their oyster. And when it doesn't work out that way, and they don't have a clear way of expressing that or working through that, because, we're not all perfect. We need treatment sometimes. And when that's not being sought, you can go down the deep, dark rabbit hole of your mind. We saw a lot of that during COVID. You start to get more isolated. We talk about a loneliness epidemic. Even though this disaffected young man has been a mass shooter, for decades now, that loneliness epidemic, has even exacerbated by the internet. It's been exacerbated. So now we have people in silos, and all they have is a chat room. And, that's basically, there are no faces behind that chat room, so everyone's a keyboard commando. And it's just an isolation, but it's also isolation plus access to guns. And in some states, that's easier than in other states. And we see the repercussions of that.
All right, I'm going to, as the black man in the room, I'm going to insert race into this. Because as I see you, as I listen to you, Jennifer.
How dare you, David?
Yeah, how dare I? Yeah, because race has never had anything to do with anything in the United States of America. How dare I? So as I listened to you, Jennifer, I immediately thought about the Michael Douglas movie Falling Down, which may be the quintessential kind of Hollywood predictor of what we're experiencing today. The disaffected white man who is disaffected because he believes that he is entitled to certain things that he doesn't get. If I remember correctly, that's the premise of that movie, basically. And I'm hearing you say that seems to be the profile today, except you didn't mention race. Now, I think there are disaffected young black men as well. But what they end up doing is, in the black community, because of the historic racism and because of white supremacy, we don't go out, generally speaking, we don't go out and shoot up white people, white neighborhoods, white institutions. We turn inward and kill ourselves, shoot up ourselves. But what I'm seeing and what I'm sensing, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that the disaffected young white man, goes out and has no problem aiming at the institutions, because even maybe that is enabled by entitlement. Now, I know I've said a lot there. What are your thoughts?
That's a really astute observation. There have been mass shooters of color of sadly, all races and backgrounds. And it breaks down generally the way our population demographics break down. However, you're right, though. White men expect the world, so they take it out on the world, right? That is a really astute observation. One thing you did mention, Falling Down, is interesting. I'd covered this for years and years and had never seen that movie. And about a year ago, I sat down and I finally watched it. My first thought was, I can't believe Hollywood made this in 1993. My second thought was, wow, this stems from a domestic incident. He's upset because his wife split up with him and he's not getting custody of his child. So we see that a lot. Private turmoil. A shooter wants to make the world feel his pain. And we see that a lot. And so he takes it out on institutions that have failed him. He can sometimes, this happens, sadly, a domestic shooting in public becomes a mass shooting. Somebody's looking for an ex, and then, everyone around that person ends up getting shot. But the race element plays a big part of it. I have a theory that the era of modern mass shootings really began with the UT Austin shooting, right? In 1966, a white man opened fire at a college. What was going on in the country in the 60s? The Civil Rights Movement. I think there is a possibility that white men saw the writing on the wall and realized, that the future is a multiracial democracy. And no one could know this then, but we are facing a demographic shift that is going to be seismic, and it's going to put white people in the minority. And there are people freaking out about that. We've seen that in our electoral politics. That's a big driver of what's going on right now. And I really do think you are right that there is a racial element to this, that, taking it out on a society that they feel suddenly has no place for them because a black man is going to take their place. Now, of course, Black people can tell you that makes no sense. You cannot convince a Black person that we're living in a Black supremacy country. It's clearly a white supremacy country. But, with no support, no, you're not talking to people, that idea can go around and round in your mind, and suddenly you're in the rabbit hole and you're siloed, and guns seem like the only answer.
And even if you look at a country that has made a shift like South Africa, where there's a majority rule now, from a racial standpoint, the economic power, as I understand it, still lies with white people in that country by and large. So, there's sort of an unreasonable kind of fear that I think and paranoia that has taken over some white people. Probably not even most, but some white people in this country. Now, let me ask you about another aspect of this thing that I have heard discussed, and I think this applies more to the mass shooters and who are on the younger end of the age spectrum, and probably the millennials to Gen Zs, I guess. We're talking that there's talk about the sexually frustrated young white man, the young white man who feels rejected by women, can't get dates, doesn't have a sexual outlet, with another person, and that factors into it. I've seen some writing about that, reporting about that. What's your take on that?
Well, everybody's heard the term incel by now, right? And
yes.
There was, it really is kind of a subgroup online. We saw with the Isla Vista shooting in 2014 in California, the perpetrator of that shooting was an incel. This is another, part of the rabbit hole, the silo, and we've actually heard from former people in this community who have said, look, I was, in this brainwash of, bitterness. Women won't date me. They only want these really good looking chads, they call them. And I'm not that. So F everyone. And it really, there's this bitterness. But people who've left that mindset have said, all it took was me just reaching out and making a connection with another person. Sometimes a woman, a relationship brings them out of it. And they rejoin the community again, and the community of, humanity. Because they really are. It really is like a self-imposed separation. And that plus access to guns. We have all of the things you see in America are present in other countries. You have people who have that bitterness, that incel, you have disaffected people in the rabbit hole. The only difference is that we make it much easier to get guns here. And so here, that kind of stuff can result in violence. And which is why that, laws are important, but there's actually another slice of the gun violence prevention community, exemplified by groups like Sandy Hook Promise, that are let's kind of look out for each other and do kind of a threat assessment within our own communities. If somebody is teetering on that edge, let's personally try to pull them back. And they've actually prevented violence in schools that way. It really takes that connection that the age of the internet, as wonderful as it is, it's brought me to you today. Mm-hmm. It does have its downsides. And this isolation is one of them. We never used to live like this. We used to live in, we were nomadic people living in communities. It took a village to raise our kids. This is very new for us. And unfortunately, in this country, we make it easy to get guns, so it can be deadly.
Yeah. 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 It's just, it's social, listen, I'm an old person, at this, here. And,
Me too.
And so I grew up,
Gen X.
So I grew up in a time when, we went out, we rode the bikes around the neighborhood. That's how you knew where everybody was you could spot the bikes there. And we didn't, I use social media. I'm on the internet. I do a lot of stuff with it, but I'm not necessarily relying on it. It doesn't, it's all, and I'm confused by it a lot. And there's, there was a great TV show, that came out, I think this past year, called Adolescence. It was I believe it was a Netflix show. And it's a really, really great look at, what kids are kind of faced with and how they get these thoughts and how they, why they feel the way that they do a lot of times. And so when these folks is it almost always this isolation because they've been in a chat room sort of thing that they're just that they feel like the world holds nothing for them type thing? Is it almost always that way?
Sometimes it's these guys are in these chat rooms or these online communities, and it's the mass shooting itself that's the spectacle. Mm-hmm. It's, they're kind of like impressing each other now. It's kind of a copycat, but it's almost like an homage, which is really sick. Almost like this is an art piece, so we've got to copy some elements, but do them better. We're going to write on the bullets, but this time we're going to write something Fox News is going to read out, and it's going to be so funny. That's even scarier to me.
Yeah. Because
now you're trying to outdo your friends. You're trying to impress your friends. This isn't like subway surfing. This isn't, look at me, I'm doing something dangerous. And, this is real. This is not a video game. So that aspect of it is really frightening to me.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Josh. Well, you just said a trigger word for me, video game. I used to really dismiss the impact of video games. Was I wrong?
The video game itself, the first-person shooter game, because I remember this conversation around Columbine all those years ago. The first-person shooter game, they were afraid that, it was making kids seem like shooting people isn't real if you're doing it in a game. To me, honestly, I don't know. I'm sure that does play into it. They wanted to scapegoat it and not talk about gun control. We can have both conversations because in our country, we have 450 million guns. So that like things that might not lead to violence in other countries, in Japan, they don't have a problem with violence in video game. Here, that might be different. But the video game aspect of it now is, this group video game play, on the games, it's like a social networking. That aspect of it is now playing more into rather than just the action of shooing.
Yeah, there's the Discord community, right? And
yes,
all those folks.
Exactly.
Which was I think was a thing in the Charlie Kirk deal, which gets me to the other thing I was going to ask you is, there's now a lot of talk of this rising left wing violence and shooters and things. Do we have a left wing shooter problem?
People from the left have perpetrated shootings. The congressional baseball practice shooting in 2017. There was a bombing, an attempted bombing in Times Square. That was a Trump foe. It's mostly right wing. But here's the thing. We're talking about people who are not rational, no matter who they voted for. So it's weird to make this a politics discussion when this person is clearly unhinged. And I understand the reason that it's happening. And it's happening because we have a very politically charged environment in Washington. And if you can point your finger and say, it's this, we don't have to talk about gun control. And so, but most political violence is perpetrated by people with right-wing leanings. Now, that is not like mainstream, right-wing lawmakers. We're talking about, far-right extremism. I think it's like 75%. There are a lot of graphics going around social media to combat this idea of the radical left lunatic shooter. That is not happening. Right now, the danger is from people who have been radicalized by the far right. That is the preeminent danger. It doesn't mean that people radicalized by the far left aren't happening, but there isn't really an established far left. We don't have far left militias like we have far right militias. We don't have a far left Proud Boys. That just doesn't exist. So a lot of the radicalization is happening on the right.
What is that? What is that word? Antifada? Am I saying it right?
Antifa?
Antifa. Thank you.
It's not a real organization.
They would say Antifa. Yeah. But that's what they say, though. They trot that out and they say Antifa, right?
Yeah. And I'm concerned because when somebody is telling you that there's a lot of smoke and there's clearly no fire, it's like, well, what is this really for? Is this just to shut down dissent or criticism of your policies by saying it's left wing, it's left wing? Even talking about what we're doing wrong, now you're threatening our lives on the right. Well, no, we should be able to discuss and name these things in a respectful debate environment. But Antifa is not an organization. They, as far as I know, I mean, I didn't in the communist Christmas card. I didn't get my invite, so I don't know. I mean, I don't think it's a building. It just doesn't exist. It's a philosophy. Antifa. I mean, our grandparents and great grandparents who fought World War II were Antifa.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Listen, we're gonna let you go because man, this has been great. I hate to do that, but I do want to do one thing. You've done this obviously, and anybody who's listened for the last 20 minutes knows that you clearly have way more information than the rest of us. And so as I sat here, I just the one question I kept coming back to is, what do you think most people miss about this problem? Well, I mean, if there's one thing that one point you wish you could get across to people, you've done this for so long, you've covered so many of these things, you banged your head against this wall for, decades now. What do most people fail to understand, or what do they misidentify, or what do they couch wrong? What are we missing?
Any gun that is in the wrong hands is in the wrong hands because of a legal gun owner or a legal gun seller. Guns don't start out illegally. Nobody buys them direct from the manufacturer. They're shipped to dealers who sell them to the general public. And from there, they're sold off book, they're stolen, something happens where they get out onto the street, which means that it's everyone's responsibility as a legal gun owner or an FFL, a seller, to be responsible about who you're giving your guns to, who you're selling your guns to. A lot of it relies on the honor system in our country. I think people would be shocked to understand how much of our gun sales system and gun access relies on the honor system. Like, promise you're allowed to have this gun, right? Okay, so I'm going to sell it to you, neighbor, without a background check because that's legal here in Texas or Alabama. It's the honor system, and that could be an illegal person who shouldn't own a gun. But no one's going to catch that unless a cop pulls them over. So there you have a lot of opportunity for a gun to get in the wrong hands. It is our responsibility as law-abiding citizens to really make sure that guns don't get into the wrong hands. I think that Americans don't understand their role in that.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to probably use that. I'm going to give you full credit, but I'm probably going to use that in something that I write. Jennifer, thank you so much for coming and spending some time with us and educating us and everybody who listens and on this stuff. And God bless you for what you do. I don't like as I said, like the folks that cover the prisons. I don't know how you keep getting up and keep going at it like that. But thank you. Thank you for it. We really do appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. That is Jennifer Mascia. She's fantastic. We're going to slide out. We'll come back and wrap this thing up in just a minute. It's Alabama Politics This Week. We're back in a moment. All righty. Welcome back. Alabama Politics This Week. Josh Moon, David Person. Thanks to Jennifer Mascia for coming on, spending some time with us, and all that information. Thanks to the folks at Wind Creek for sponsoring, and we really do appreciate them. Thanks to the folks at SPLC as well. And thanks to all of you folks for listening, leaving the reviews and whatnot. All right. I guess, before we get into, can y'all hear that? I think somebody might have come to the door. Listen, you know what? You do this. Hey, look at the background. Where do y'all think I was doing this from? You think I was doing it in the studio that I decorated like this? I mean, come on. We got dogs. All right. So it happens, and they're very protective. So far, 0 break-ins thanks to those dogs. But it's before we get to the right wing bonehead of the week here, I wanted to bring up, I wrote a column about the Democrats fighting still, and just kind of, that they've had this whole thing now with the Shamari Figures folks, Shamari, his mother Vivian, not helping and getting involved with Barbara Drummond and her race down for the Mobile mayor, to be Mobile mayor, which she lost by just a few votes. And, people are angry about that. They're very angry at the Figures folks. There's been a lot of things go back and forth on Facebook and around. It's been some of it's been fairly ugly. And I've heard from some folks close, that they didn't get involved, or Shamari didn't get involved because he didn't get involved in any mayor's races. And so that was just a decision they had made, and they stuck to it. And I've also heard from the other side that that's not true, that they had done there was a whole back and forth between Barbara Drummond and Vivian Figures. It was a little bit ugly about the use of Shamari's face on a campaign flyer that was put out by a PAC, which Barbara Drummond had no control over. Right. And they were angry about that. And so it just really, it keeps really, really being an issue. And it's not helpful. Okay. It's not helpful to anybody. All right. If that happened and the Figures count come out and said that they weren't going to help Barbara Drummond because of whatever reason, whatever happened in the past, that's not productive, man. It's not productive for the Democratic Party, for Democrats and a whole, because having a person like Barbara Drummond in that seat in Mobile, number one, no matter what it means for the party itself, no matter what it might mean for being able to have some influence over who gets contracts and all that kind of stuff, which, listen, let's be honest, that's a reality of life, okay? That's a reality of life, and we can pretend like that's not something that's supposed to take place, but it absolutely is, okay? It's absolutely happening in every Republican-run city right now today, is that there are certain people that are friendly with the Republicans who are getting really good contracts for whatever that they're doing, okay? That just happens. And it's helping the Republican Party as a whole, because those people are then donating to the Republican Party on a statewide level and helping build candidates up and push them into leadership roles. And that's why it's important. Okay. So, no, but that aside, what we all know here is that between the two candidates that were in that runoff, we all know as progressive people that Barbara Drummond was by far the better candidate for the people of Mobile. We know that. We know that she was, and listen, Spiro Chirigatis may be I've heard from people that he's a great guy, okay, that he is a good person and he wants to do a good job. And I hope he does. I'll support him. Too. If he called me today, I'd do whatever he asked to help support the people of Mobile. Okay. I would. But I believe fully, having had Barbara Drummond on here, having listened to her, having talked to her numerous times, having had other conversations with her, that I know that her heart's in the right place, that she's a smart lady, that she has compassion, and that she understands a lot of the issues better because she's lived them than Chirigatis did. And so now the pettiness here, if that's what took place, the pettiness have now deprived those folks of that person, as their leader of Mobile. And in addition to, what it's done to the party overall. And look, if you want to fight and argue amongst yourselves, okay. But at a point, it's got to stop. And you've got to do like, as I said, you got to do like the Republicans, circle the damn wagons and get the win in these places, and then hash it out later after you've gotten the win. After you've won the war, then you can hash out your differences while you're divvying up contracts or whatever else here. But The way that they're doing things is harmful to everybody up and down the line, including the people that we should be serving. And that it's got to stop.
Well, it does. But then if you look at the state of the Democratic Party in Alabama, it's what goes on. I mean,
Yes.
whether you're talking, from the very top, of the party on down to the counties, what you see a lot of times is unproductive kind of bickering that goes on. I don't know. I mean, I think there's not, I mean, if I were going to place the blame anywhere, I mean, I would say that the leadership of the party of this state had an obligation to, if two prominent Democrats are bickering, and even though that was a nonpartisan race, as you've already indicated, Mrs. Drummond is clearly a Democrat. We know that just because of her tenure in the legislature. The leaders of the party had an obligation, I think, to be arbiters and maybe they tried. I don't know. Maybe they tried and just weren't successful. I hope they tried. I hope they tried to sit, Mrs. Drummond down and Mrs. Figures down and try to work something out. I hope that they tried to, intervene with the congressman if he was actively engaged in something there to work this out. Because as you just said earlier, Democrats ought to be working together just like Republicans work together. And again, I say the onus is on the party leadership when seeing this going on to intervene.
Yeah. Do you think that's happening?
Well, I don't see any evidence of it. I'm not going to go as far as to say it didn't happen because I don't know that, but I will say it doesn't appear as though it happened. And if it did not happen, then that's a real problem. And it's a problem that's bigger than Figures versus Drummond. It's a larger problem.
Yeah. I think that you and I probably have the same feelings on that, which is there's very little chance that happened. And I think that's a problem as well, that we both have a doubt that happened. That anybody stepped in, that anybody was aware of it, that anybody did a lot of things. I mean, we had Tabitha Eisner on last week, and we know what she said about a lot of this stuff. And I thought Tabitha was very cordial.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought very non-confrontational about things. I thought she handled that all the entire aspect of things from a very neutral position. Do you think that I'm wrong about that?
Yeah, I don't recall her saying anything that was divisive about that. No, I don't.
I thought she kind of put blame on both sides of stuff for continuing, and I think we probably got one of our better explanations of the turmoil. That's that a lot of people blame it on Doug Jones and Joe Reid and Randy Kelly and those folks, and she said no, that it goes much deeper than that, and I thought that was probably one of the better explanations for this, and the distrust that's there, the the kind of the paranoia that's taken root in the party, and the only way I know how to fix that is the same thing that has ever done it for the country as a whole, which is to focus everybody on one common enemy, one common goal. You saw it after 9/11. For example, I think we would all agree that never have we been more united than we were after 9/11, and we had a common enemy and common goal. And that's, of course, that's eroded tremendously over the course of time, but, as you might expect. But I think that's true here. And I think if we could focus people on, hey, look, you and I agree on, I may disagree with Joe Reid and Randy Kelly on a lot of stuff that they do, but I know this. I know that Joe Reid and Randy Kelly are good men who want to do the right thing. And if we put them in charge of stuff, that they would lift from the bottom up and they would implement policies that really bettered the lives of majority of Alabamians. All right. I know that they would do that. And I think that's where we got to start from is these are the things that we have in common. And here are the people that don't believe what we believe. We got to beat them. Then we can argue amongst ourselves about, how we're going to run things.
So there's a guy in Texas, a state representative named James Tellerico.
Yes.
Who is running for U.S. Senate. I think he is phenomenal he has done a phenomenal job of embodying that very messaging that you're talking about. He says, the problem isn't left or right. The problem is top versus bottom.
Yes.
And that's the kind of clarity that the Democrats in Alabama need to rally around. Ultimately, it's not about Jones versus Kelly or Figures versus Drummond. It's about a Republican Party that is hell-bent on enriching the top, protecting the top, and disenfranchising the bottom. And I can say that with a lot of conviction because of the policies that they back.
Yes. I mean, we've got to start focusing more on rich versus poor. Okay. I mean, it's just, it's something that resonates with everybody. And right now, all of America is feeling that. All of working America is feeling this. I'm getting the shaft because of these people, because of the policies and the things that are happening that are aiding these folks. And I think that it is a selling point that the Democrats are missing completely right now. And, we've had it in the past with the soak the rich stuff. And I think, we've got to make that better. We've got to make people understand better why they're so poor right now. And the reason they're so poor is we've got a lot of wealth concentrated up at the very top of things. And, one of the best examples I've read in recent times is this Disney World example where, Disney World used to be this place where everybody was essentially equal. Everybody took their families. It was expensive. It was expensive for a lot of folks, but it was attainable. It was attainable for most folks. Whatever you're working 40 hours a week, you could still get in the car and drive your family down to Disney World, and you could go and you could stand in the lines and you could have essentially the same experience as the millionaires. Okay. Now it's not that way. It's been changed to cater to these folks at the very top up here. These folks that have wealth that the 95% of America do not have. And because there's so much wealth at the top, Disney is perfectly okay creating that experience for them and alienating the 95% because they know that the other folks, the wealthy people, are going to supply them with enough money to sustain the company, because that's how much wealth is now concentrated at the top. And until we change that, it's never going to get better for the people at the bottom. And so we've got to make people understand that and see it. And I think that's what we've done a pretty poor job of. All right. We got to quickly get to our right wing bonehead here, and that is Reid Ingram from Montgomery Pike Road, state rep. And Reid's got himself a constitutional amendment, does he not, David?
He does. He wants to basically penalize schools for not having the Pledge of Allegiance as part of their daily routine. And also he wants to try to entrench school prayer once again into the public schools. And, this idea of sort of forced indoctrination, patriotism and religion is just un-American as far as I'm concerned. It just is. But, we got a lot of people these days who seem to feel like that's what you have to, in order to be a true American, you've got to be, these things. And if you don't comply with those things, then you're un-American. When actually the opposite is true. This country was, the First Amendment enshrined certain rights, which is the right to speak freely, which means you have the right to think freely and to worship freely, or not worship, So this is a real problem.
Yeah, it's it's idiotic. First of all, it's I mean, it really is, and I'm so sick of these people, and especially the folks like Reid Ingram. Reid Ingram lives in Pike Road, which is a breakaway community from Montgomery that is just had an election in which a guy narrowly missed winning the mayor's race who wanted to exclude incoming kids from Pike Road, people that moved from their schools. Well, I wanted to exclude them from their schools because the culture of Pike Road has changed too much over the course of the last several years. And I think we all know what those sorts of buzzwords and things mean. But it's those sorts of people that then come back and believe that prayer and a pledge of allegiance in school is going to somehow fix the school system. And it's not. It's not. It never fixed anything. It never had the 5-minute prayer and Pledge of Allegiance at the beginning of the school day never affected anybody's performance or behavior or anything else the rest of the day. Never. It never played that. The difference, if you felt like there was a difference, the difference was in funding. The difference was in parental involvement. The difference was in resources that were available to the students. All of those things are what made the difference, okay? The poverty levels of the surrounding community, those things made the difference, not the prayer, not the prayer. You're focusing on the thing that you want to have helped instead of the thing that actually did. So, all right, let's get out of here.
More Christian nationalism.
Yeah. Hey, marching to their own drum and not caring at all that this is the whole reason we formed this place was to get away from it. It's unbelievable. All right. Till next week, y'all be safe out there.